Now I know yesterday we did not cover the case when C was negative, but we will cover it here. We will cover it today. Now when we work through these here, we're not going to do every single one of them in the packet because there are a good number of them in here. We're most likely going to probably finish up earlier than we did yesterday. Now we look at factoring, and we went through the steps yesterday. So we look at this first one here, 8x squared minus 56x plus 48. Our first step was to do what? Find the greatest common factor. So is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? 8. And we can factor it out. And when we factor a term out, we're really dividing each of the individual terms by said number. So 8x squared divided by 8 would be x squared minus. Well, 56x divided by 8 would be plus. And that's the only greatest common factor would be 8. Now, I mean, if we looked at this here and saw, oh wait, there is another number that could go into all three, we could pull it out at this point. But since we saw that 8 was the biggest one and it's the only greatest common factor, we can move on to step number 2. Well, step number 2 is with 3 spaces. Now again, the 3 spaces is mainly just for spacing so that y'all can get the parentheses wide enough so we have room for everything. So once you get the hang of this, if you don't want to put the 3 spaces, that's perfectly fine. Because if you know how big to make them, just make them and fill things in. So that finishes steps 1 and 2. Step 3 was to find the sign. So, right, if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. Well, the third term is positive and the middle sign is, so they're both going to be negative. So negative and negative. Brings us to step 4, the factors of the first and third term. Well, what are the factors of x squared? X and x. Are there any other factors? No. I mean, there's 1 in x squared, but that doesn't really help. Because if we end up using 1 in x squared, it means that we only really had 2 terms, and they had a greatest common factor of x. And we could have just pulled it out or pulled x squared out and been done. Factors of 6. And 6 and 1. Which one do we want to use? And last but not least, we plug and check, or we check it. And as we saw yesterday, x times x would always give us back to x squared. 2 times 3 will get us back to 6, because that's actually where we got them from. So we don't necessarily have to do that multiplication. But our x times negative 3 would be negative 3x. Negative 2 times x would be negative 2x. And negative 3x minus 2x is negative 5x. Is that what we wanted? No, we wanted negative 7x, yes? Well, I can't do anything with the 1x and 1x because that's all there is. Now we could switch the 2 and 3. Would that do anything? No, because the first terms are 1 and 1, and they're both minus, it would give us the exact same thing. So instead of doing 2 and 3, we can do 6 and 1 or 1 and 6. So that didn't work. So x times negative 1 would be negative x. Negative 6 times x would be negative 6x. And negative x minus 6x is negative. Is that what we wanted? Mm-hmm. And that's it. That's all we have here. Any questions on this here? We good with this here? Yes? So, Jesse, yes. Not everything's going to be factorable. Not every polynomial that we have in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c will factor. This method here works most of the time or some of the times. As long as it's factorable, then we can factor it. But it will not always work. And most of the ones that we have here will factor. I'm not going to put one on the test that says solve the following equation by factoring if it doesn't factor. Okay, so if it factors, it is a great method to use. If it doesn't factor, we have other methods that we're going to use and learn that do work. So factoring falls in one of the categories of sometimes. There are two that we're going to learn when solving that will work always, no matter the equation. So let's look at this one here. Is there a greatest common factor between 14x squared, 31x, and 15? No. Because the only real factors of 14 are 1, 2, 7, and 14. Well, 15 is 1, 3, 5, and 15. So we know those two don't have a greatest common factor. The whole thing won't. So we can move on to step number 2. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. So when we look at this here, what is our next part? We need to find the sign. Since the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term, which is positive. So both signs are positive. Questions on this here so far? Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. So we're looking at the factors of 14x squared. Well, x squared we know is going to be x and x. That's the only way we can have x squared, yes? Now the 14 on the other hand, 14 is what? 1 times 14 or 2 times 7. 15 is 1 and 15 or 3 times 5. All right. Pick a set of factors for 14. 2 and 7. Pick a set of factors for 15. Huh? 1 and 15. So we just picked those and now we're going to check it. 2x times 15 would be 30x. 1 times 7x is plus 7x, which would be 37x. Is that what we wanted? No. Okay. So we can switch the 1 and 15. And 1. And we go to check. Wait a minute. What are we doing here? 15 times. Am I going to go way past 30? Do I even need to check this one? No. Okay, so this one here, we can see because of that, it's going to go way past it. Now, I would check it if the signs were opposite, because they're both positive, so the numbers are going to add together and get bigger, yes? So there's no chance of it coming back down, because if one of them was positive and one was negative, we could have the subtraction to pull it back down. But here, since they're both positive, it's just going to make the number even bigger, because I think that's going to end up being 132. So 7 times 15 is 105 plus 2, so 107. For something like that, it's going to be way too big. So, I didn't mean to erase it, but since we've tried every possible combination with, well, 1 and 15 and 2 and 7 won't work. Now, 1 and 14 and 1 and 15 might. Probably not, but they might. So we can look at 3 and 5 instead. Well, 2x times 5 is 3 times 7x. And 10 plus 21 is that what we wanted? And that's it. Questions on this here? How do we feel with these here? We feel good with these here? So, do we need to see this one here, 2x minus 7x plus 5? Okay. We good with this one here? Let's look at this one specifically because we didn't have time to look at this one yesterday. Now, the whole process that we go through really isn't any different than what we did on the last one. Because again, our first step is to see if there's a greatest common factor. Is our greatest common factor between 4x squared, 19x, and 5? No. So we do 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Step number 2, step number 3 is to find the sign. So if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Was our third term positive or negative? Negative. So if it's negative, the signs are opposite. So one would be positive and the other would be negative. No, it doesn't matter which one we do because our last step is to plug in, check. So if it works out we have them flipped, we can always flip it. And we'll possibly see it. I'll make it work this way. But there is a way to know if we need to flip the signs. Now let's look at our factors. The factors of the first term and the last term. Well, 4x squared, well, the x squared we'll know we'll need x and x. That's the only way we get x squared. Now with 4, we can have 4x and 1x, or, well, so we could have 4, which is 1 times 4, or 2 and 2. Which one do we want to try first? 2 and 2. The factors of 5 are 1 and 5. Let's say 5 and 1. And last but not least, we need to check it just to make sure we got it right. So 2x times negative 1 would be negative 2x. 5 times 2x is plus 10x. And negative 2x plus 10x is 8x. Is that what we wanted? No. Well, switching the 2x and 2x, would that change anything? Would switching the 1 and 5 really change anything? Not really. So we can do 1 and 4. Does it matter which one we put first? Do you have a preference on 4? 1 and 4, we'll put the 4 second. X times negative 1 would be negative x. 5 times 4x is plus 20x. And negative x plus 20x would be 19x, yes? Is that what we wanted? No. We want negative instead of positive, yes? Well, the signs are wrong, correct? Because the sign's wrong. So what can we do? Because instead of flipping anything or changing the numbers, I can switch the negative to positive and the positive to negative. And that would give us the correct middle term, because now we have x times 1, which would be positive x. The negative 5 times 4x would make it negative 20x, so x minus 20x would be negative 19x. Now flipping the 1 and 5, instead of changing the signs, would actually give us a completely different setup, because we would have had x plus 5, or x not plus 5, it would be x plus 1 times 4x minus 5. Well, this wouldn't work because we get that 20 by 4 times 5, yes? Now we could switch the 4 and 5 to see if that does work, and most likely it could, but the easiest thing is just to flip the signs. Because if we get the correct number but wrong sign, change the signs and you got it right. And it's the easiest way to get to the right answer. Questions on this here? Do we want to look at, let's look at this one. Is there a greatest common factor between all three terms? 6x squared, x, and 12. Is there a greatest common factor between these three? It'd be 1 in front of the x. So there's not really a greatest common factor besides 1. So we can move on to step number 2. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Finding the sign. If the sign of the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So here our sign is negative, so the signs are positive and negative. They're going to be opposite. And then that brings us to the factors of the first and third term. Well, the factors of 6x squared, well, we know part of it's going to be x and x, because we have to have that to get the x squared. We'll have x and x. That's a good place to start. Well, the factors of 6, we do have 2. We have 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. Because we have 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. Which one do we want to try first? 1 and 6. So 1 and 6. 12. Well, we have 1 times 12 or 2 times 6 or 3 and 4, not 3 and 3. Which factors of 12 do we want to try first? Two and 6? So which one do we want to put first, 2 or 6? Do we need to even check this? No, why not? There's a reason, because we did say it yesterday, and it's dealing with the 6x minus 6. There's a common factor of 6, yes? Was there a common factor to begin with? No, so there can't be 1 in either parentheses. I mean, we could switch the 2 and 6. Would that work? Because 6 and 2, are we fine here? Because 6 and 2, do they have a common factor? 2, okay. So that means those don't work. So 1 and 12, so we can say 1 and 12, yes? Well, 6x and 12 have a greatest common factor of 6, so that doesn't work. So we can say Okay, I would agree. Now, if we go through all the 1 and 6, or 2 and 3, then we might need to come back to 1 and 6, but I don't think we'll need to. Which one do we want to try first out of 12, now that we have 2 and 3? 3 and 4? So 3 would have to go here, and 4 would have to go here, yes? Because we can't have the 3x and 3 and the 2x and 4 together, because they would both have a greatest common factor. Now we can check this here. 2x times negative 4 would be negative 8x. 3x times 3x is plus. Negative 8x plus 9x is? Is that what we wanted? And that's it. That's the right answer. Any questions on any of this here? Let's look at the next one. Here we want to factor negative 4x squared minus 8x plus 5. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? No. Have we dealt with one so far where the term in front of x squared was negative? No. So what we can do here is we can actually factor out a negative 1. We can factor the negative out. That is perfectly fine. Because when we start looking at the factors for 4x squared when it's negative, we have to take that negative into account. Because here, the factors of negative 4 would be 1 times negative 4, or negative 4 times 1, or 2 times negative 2, or negative 2 times 2. We have to take it into account when we factor. But if I divide everything by negative 1, or factor it out, what's negative 4x squared divided by negative 1? It would be positive 4x squared. Negative 8x divided by negative 1 would be plus 8x. And 5 divided by negative 1 would be negative 5. Now, it would be perfectly correct to have factored this with the negative included. You would get the right answer. But I find this to be a little bit easier. Now, as we already said, there is no greatest common factors besides the negative 1, so we can move on to the 2 sets of parentheses. And I dropped the 1 because it's understood. Since the negative is out front, it is negative 1. And we can move on to the next part. Well, since the third term is negative, the signs are going to be what? Opposite. If the third term is negative, our signs are opposite. One's going to be positive, one is going to be negative. And again, I just put positive first, negative second. It's just personal habit. It doesn't matter how we set it up. You get to pick which one you want to put first. Now that brings us to the fourth step, the factors of the first and third term. Well, 4x squared, well, we know the factors of x squared are going to be x and x. Now we do need to figure out the factors of 4. Well, our factors of 4, 1 and 4, or which one do we want to use? We can use 2 and 2. Factors of 5 are 1 and 5. That's the only set of factors, so we can just go on and throw it in. And last but not least, we need to check. 2x times negative 5 would be negative 10x. 1 times 2x is plus 2x. And negative 10x plus 2x is negative 8x. Is that what we wanted? Because we want the 8x to be negative or positive. because since we pulled the negative out, it turned the 8x from negative to positive. We pulled that negative out, so we need it to be positive. So exactly, we can switch our signs. And that would give us the correct answer. And again, I pulled that negative out so we don't have to worry about having the weird step with signs, because it'd be a little weird with the signs if we had that. Because it is possible to do it with the negative, and it would just tell us that it would be negative 2x plus 1 times 2x minus 5, because we just have to take that into account. But doing it the way we did works just fine also. Any other questions on this here? Do we feel comfortable with all these here? Yes? Okay. If we don't feel like y'all need to see another one, y'all can go on and just start the assignment. So you have the rest of the time in class to work on this assignment here. If you want to know any of the answers for the problems, let me know, and I can check it for you.